Damaged Defenders by Sherza. Chapter 95. Tony. Alfheim. Part 3. There was a certain joy Tony found in winning against his fellow assholes. And the bigger an asshole they were, the better he liked it. Kicking Senator Stern's butt to the curb and outmaneuvering an entire Senate committee had pretty much made his year. Bitch slapping hammer? He'd do it every day of the week and never tire of it, the smarmy asshole. Kicking Solar in the chaps was proving to be every bit as fun as ruining Stern's fun. So, here's the thing, Sal. This is a fight. And from what I've been told, you, Princess, don't like getting your hands dirty. So I'm actually thinking even talking to you is a waste of time. I'm thinking I actually need to talk to whoever the big kahuna of the Dark Elves is. Tony said, ignoring Salar's enraged bristling. Tony then turned a circle, glancing around the elves gathered around them. Lots and lots of blonde hair and fair skin. But he spotted a few folks lurking in the back that couldn't be anything other than Dark Elves. One of them was a real standout. Mostly for the fact that he was quite literally black. Hair, skin, and eyes were all pitch matte black. If it hadn't been for the whites of the girls, it was hard to tell. They all had fairly long hair and were all on the lean side. No big busts anywhere to be seen. Eyes. Tony wouldn't have known where his eyes even were. The fact that the guy was one of about 5 dark elves in the room made it pretty clear he was either important as hell or a servant. Arguing against the servant position was what looked like leather armor. Seriously. Leather. But then again, these guys apparently didn't, punch each other or even knife each other all that much, so leather armor was probably all they needed. And this was part 2 of Tony's offensive, because Loki and Thor had made it pretty clear that the Light Elves and the Dark Elves didn't much like each other. So, diss the hell out of the Light Elf leader, get him chasing his tail, and earn a few brownie points with the guy they'd actually be working with along the way. Which would hopefully curtail a little bit of his assholery before Tony had to go at him too. Tony grinned toothily and all but bounced over to the guy. So, I'm guessing here, but I'm thinking that at worst you're part of the army, which means you can introduce me to whoever leads you guys if you're not him. But I'm thinking you are him, because I don't think that lot, he flapped ahead in the direction of the Light Elves, would want random Dark Elves running around in armor in their place. Am I right? That got him an amused snort. I am Kavlos, and yes, I lead the elf army. Tony blinked, because this guy's voice sounded like it was coming from the sub-basement underneath 3 or 4 other sub-basements. He was pretty sure the guy was actually managing to produce tones below the normal human level of hearing. So I'm thinking you and I should get out of this dog and pony show and go do some real work. What do you say? Tony asked after a moment. Kavlos cocked his head, and it was hard to tell thanks to the monochrome coloring he had going on, but Tony was fairly sure the humor had an edge of condescension to it, but he could work with that. That would be wise, Kevlos rumbled, and, completely ignoring a by then indignantly sputtering Solar. Seriously, if the guy got any more like Lucius Malfoy, Tony was going to start calling him that. Solar not understanding the gib, be damned. The 2 of them headed out, trailed by the other 4 members of the group doing the tour. Loki was openly grinning, and unless Tony misheard on the way past him, snickering quietly. Thor and Steve looked like they didn't know whether to be amused or worried. Soldier had a faint bit of amusement about him, but he was otherwise blank-faced by the time Tony got a good look at him. Kavlos led them out of the palace and to a surprisingly squat square building close by, but half hidden among trees. It was the only building in the vicinity that didn't make his inner architect shriek. This, it very quickly became obvious, was an army barracks, as they were greeted by a room full of dark elves. The whole building seemed to be one room, split into 4 areas. A mess hall, a training area, a sleeping area, with 3 level bunk beds, and an area to just kick back and relax, but not training. Tony assumed there were bathrooms hiding somewhere too, but he couldn't see a door to such an area from the front door. Do they ever let you out of here? Tony blurted out, because the whole thing was utilitarian and depressing. 4 unit training exercises, Kavlos rumbled, and for our guard shifts. Yeek. Also, yeesh. These people, they hurt Tony's brain. He was actually surprised they had it sunk to 2 separate governments or something.
Come, there is much to discuss.
Kevlas rumbled and led the way to the training area. Immediately, the folks who'd been using it either cleared out or stopped what they were doing and congregated around Kevlas, Tony, and the rest of the group.
Show us your world, human. If we are to aid in defending it, we need to know it.
Kevlas rumbled. A bit on the arrogant side, but a valid point. Tony plunked the suitcase dude down on the ground and kicked it into action in inspection mode. A few quick pokes and the helmet's eye slits projected one of a series of images of Earth. No holographic stuff, just actual pictures. If he had full access to Jarvis, he could do the holographic stuff, but the computing power Jarvis had access to in the suit out here wasn't enough for holograms. Much to Tony's amusement, either Kevlas was a ton more tolerant than Salar, or he was assuming that what Tony was doing was magic. Tony wasn't about to ask to clarify which it was. Right, so, this is part of Earth. I've got a bunch of pictures to give you an overview with, and if you're game, you can actually come to Earth at some point before Thanos shows up to see it firsthand.
That will be up to King Salar,
Kevlas said, his tone making it clear he didn't think Salar would okay such a thing. Tony snorted a laugh. Yeah, no. Unless I missed something, you weren't a slave, which means you could do what you want. So if you want to come to Earth to check stuff out, you can. Kevlas did a weird little twitch that Tony decided to assume was agreement. Anyway, Tony said, Earth has 7 continents and a lot of islands, most of which are inhabited. Our population is around 7 billion. And admitting to that never got old because it never failed to shock the heck out of the other realm residents. Understandable when not a one of them had a population measured at even 1 billion, never mind 7! Kevlas was no exception to the shock reaction, his eyes going wide enough a ring of white was visible all the way around the iris. At any rate, I'm thinking. Tony said, well, it had actually been Steve's idea, but Tony was still trying to keep him and Soldier out of the line of potential fire, so... yeah, of putting you guys on the islands. You could teleport around, which would allow you to island hop a lot easier than any of the other groups, to back each other up if you need it, and to get to whichever island's getting attacked fast. Most of the Nidavellir contingent's going to be here. Tony pointed to Asia, the dwarves' space side, of course, and Thargim will be leading that front of the fight. The others will be scattered all over the other big land masses and fighting units paired up with Earth units. Kevlas studied the images as they cycled through.
Leaving the islands vulnerable thanks to the travel time required for those with no magic.
Yeah, there went the condescension. But in this particular case, warranted. Without teleportation, island hopping would get very time-consuming very fast, slowing defense of the islands to a crawl and costing a lot of lives in the process. Something like that. Tony agreed. Given the guess at numbers that Heimdall has managed, we're suspecting Thanos will try to blanket the planet with Chitauri. No idea how good of a general he is, but if he's at all clever, he'll be able to pull it off. The space fleet will only be able to do so much to keep him and the Chitauri out, even if they all of them camp out just out of our atmosphere. Even with the dwarves' considerable fleet, there wasn't enough ships to cover the planet effectively, even at that short range. It'd be all too easy for Thanos to get a bunch of ships congregated in one spot and then slide a bunch of his forces through the gaps such a concentration would provide. If the fleet tried to meet Thanos further away from Earth, which Tony was betting they would, it would be even worse.
And Heimdall's guess as to numbers?
Kevlas asked. Pretty vague, but he does have a legitimate excuse. Not like these guys are marching in ranks or something. Tony said, but we're looking at tens of millions at least, very possibly into the hundreds of millions, lots of those big fanged flying things, whatever they're called, and a horde of 3-man sleds. Kevlas made a disparaging noise.
The proper spells will give us a far more accurate count than that.
At which point Loki made an extremely rude noise, which made Tony blink, then grin. I think that's Loki calling bullshit on that, Tony said, grinning. And if he can't do something like that, I don't think anyone can. Spells exist to count the size of an enemy's army, Loki said, but the army in question must be relatively still, staying in one spot for roughly 5 minutes for them to work. Which means with Thanos' army on the move, they're useless, Tony said. Precisely, Loki said. Tony shot Kevlas a look. Word to the wise, Kevlas, don't try to play a player. It just never works out. You get called on the carpet every time and made to look like an idiot. Nobody needs that. And this was part 3 of handling assholes. Completely dominate one of them, then remind the rest that if they don't say in line, that humiliation can be theirs. Most assholes don't like being made a fool of, so they tend to shut up and play nice, at least long enough to try to reverse the situation, which meant you had to stay one step ahead of the assholes, but Tony liked that part of the program. And Kavalos, well, he was an asshole, but a far more practical and pragmatic breed than Solar, evidently. Still had a tendency to look down his nose at non-magicals, but was willing to work with them, at least for this, anyway. So, the main question here is how the teleport thing works. I mean, Loki's explained his version. Sort of. In terms that made Tony cringe, because seriously, he was a scientist. He needed more to go on than what amounts to, it works the way I want it to work. And he was not thinking about that whole thing back in the dining room with his arc. Seriously, he'd freak out later and possibly pull Loki's hair out by the roots trying to get answers. So we'd have to climb something to do that. So what? And probably just amuse the heck out of Loki. Not like Tony could really hurt him. Seriously, Thor had taken Steve's shield to the skull during their squabble in the woods and had barely blinked. Tony didn't think anything he did without the aid of the suit would actually hurt either Thor or Loki. But that doesn't mean your version works the same way. Tony finished.
In this case, they do, Kavalos said. Queen Frigga begged.
Tony didn't let him get any further than that, mostly because he was pretty sure that both Thor and Loki would roast Kavalos' ass if he kept going. They were both of them mama's boys. Not that Tony blamed them at all for that, but yeah, bad-mouthing their mama was a quick way to the hurting. Dude, seriously, don't even try that. Queen Frigga is too badass to have begged for a damn thing in her entire life, and if you're any kind of smart, you will apologize for even starting to say that in front of her sons. Seriously, do not be a douchebag. Tony told Kavalos. Kavalos eyed him, then glanced behind Tony. Thor and Loki must have looked 10 shades of pissed off because the guy actually paled a little. He didn't apologize, but he did, when he opened his mouth again, correct what he'd started to say, which Tony figured was about as good as they were going to get.
Queen Frigga sought an elf tutor for Loki in his youth, having been tutored by one of us herself during her own youth. Her own magic is strongest in the healing arts rather than combat, and while teleportation is not explicitly for combat, it is not specifically healing related either, so she has a limited range with it.
Tony turned to look at Loki, who was still giving Kavalos the stink eye for dissing Frigga. Dude, how did you not fry these people? Because I kind of wanted to fry Solar on sight. That got him a laugh.
The tutor was forced to come to Asgard,
Loki said.
They are somewhat less full of themselves when they are alone and surrounded by members of the other realms who would be all too happy to fry them one way or another. As for after that, well, most of them know better than to trifle with me past a certain point. I find most of their attempts to best me amusing, I will admit, but past a certain point,
fine, that becomes an option, Tony said.
Yes.
Okay, anyway, if your teleporting works the way Loki's does, you really only need to know the name of the place you're going. Tony gave an amused snort. I hope you have a good memory for names because there's a lot.